She broke my arm on purpose. On purpose. It was not an accident. It was not a stumble. It was intentional. Right there, on the front steps of my house. The same steps where I once carried my first grandson, where I used to water the flowers every morning, where I sat and knitted sweaters for the whole family. I remember that moment as clearly as if it happened this morning. My arm cracked like a dry branch with a sharp, clean snap. The pain was numbing, but what truly sent a chill down my spine was Emily's eyes. No regret, not a single word of apology. My name is Margaret Wilson. I am 75 years old, living in Austin, Texas, and this is a story no one ever expects to happen in a decent American family. A story of betrayal from someone I once called daughter. If you have ever felt heartbroken by injustice or stayed silent because no one believed you, you are not alone. Stay with me until the end of this story. I promise you, there will be something that shows you justice is real and peace can return in the most unexpected way. If you believe this story deserves to be heard, please hit subscribe and leave a comment below. Thank you for giving my voice a chance to live on. My name is Margaret Wilson. I am 75 years old and live in Austin, Texas, in a quiet neighborhood lined with old oak trees. The house I live in was built with love and care by my husband, Robert Wilson, who spent 40 years shaping it into a home. But after he passed away, the house slowly began to feel empty, until my son David moved in with his wife. Emily, the new daughter-in-law, gave me a bit of hope at first. She was young, energetic, always spoke sweetly, and called me Mom Maggie. She would help me clean the kitchen or, accidentally, brew a cup of tea just the way I liked it. I even thought to myself, this girl is really sweet. Maybe I am luckier than I thought. David is my only child. A kind and hard-working man, he works as a technical manager at a small construction company downtown. He has never been one to show affection easily, but deep down, I know he still cares about me. In those first few months, I truly believed we were a family. I cooked, Emily cleaned, David worked, and came home to have dinner with us. We all watched TV together and laughed when little Lucas, my 3-year-old grandson, tried to say his first words. I am not the type to interfere in a young couple's life. All I ever wanted was to keep this home warm and full of love. I quietly kept to myself, tending the backyard garden, stopping by church now and then, and baking cookies for the neighbors. But some things were not as they seemed. I began to notice small changes in Emily. So subtle, so clever. She stopped sitting down for dinner. She started closing the bedroom door and whispering into the phone for long stretches of time. Most importantly, she began taking control of the household finances. I said nothing. I kept telling myself, you are old now, do not be difficult. But a mother's instincts, especially one with a lifetime of experience, are rarely wrong. Something was shifting. One evening, I overheard Emily on the phone. Her voice was low, but I caught every word. She is useless now. Just have her sign everything. After that, things will get much easier for us. I stood frozen behind the door. My heart pounded so hard, I had to steady myself against the wall. That was the moment I realized I was no longer Mom Maggie in her eyes. After that night, I never looked at Emily the same way again. I started paying more attention to her eyes, her body language, the way she spoke to David, and especially the way she treated me when no one else was around. She stopped pretending to be sweet. That cold, distant look took over. One time I gently asked, "Would you like some help with dinner?" She snapped back, "You should rest. Please stay out of the kitchen." I did not argue. I just pressed my lips together and went back to my room, like a ghost, fading into the walls of my own home. But the worst part was not the rejection. It was the slow erosion of my rights in what I once called my sanctuary. One day, Emily brought a stranger into our house. She called him a family financial advisor. They sat at the dining table with David, discussing ownership restructuring to optimize inheritance taxes. It sounded reasonable, until I saw her slip David a thick stack of papers and whisper, "Just sign it. Everything will be fine." I walked over and asked, "What are these papers, sweetheart?" Emily glanced at me and said, "You do not need to worry about it. Just sign them. It will be better for everyone." My hands trembled as I took the contract. My eyes are not what they used to be, but I could still make out words like full ownership, asset transfer, and non-refundable. I knew right then I had almost been scammed out of everything I had. That night, I pretended to be tired and went to bed early, but I did not sleep. I sat by the window for hours, watching the streetlights flicker outside, asking myself, why? What did I ever do to deserve such cruelty from my daughter-in-law? Everything reached a breaking point one March afternoon. I was out watering the flowers when Emily walked by, holding a bag of trash. I softly asked, "Emily, can you just tell me the truth? What is it you are really after?" She did not answer. She spun around and grabbed my arm, harder than I ever expected. I stumbled backward and tripped over the steps. There was a loud, unmistakable crack. My arm was broken, not because I fell, but because she pushed me. On purpose. She froze for a second, then cried out, "Oh no, Mum fell. I'm calling an ambulance." But there was no fear in her eyes, only calculation. She lifted me up stiffly, like I was a broken piece of furniture. At the hospital, the doctor told me I had fractured the ulnar bone in my right arm. David was away on business in Houston, so Emily signed all the hospital paperwork. I remember it clearly. When the doctor left the room, she leaned in close and whispered in my ear, "You are old. What do you need all that property for? Just sign it, and you will not have to deal with any more accidents." That was the moment I knew this was not a misunderstanding. This was a crime. I did not scream. I did not lash out. I just looked at her and smiled. A quiet smile that caught her off guard. Because from that moment on, I had made a decision. I would no longer be the victim. I would not let myself be devoured in silence. I was going to begin the plan. A quiet, clever plan, one she would never forget. A plan that would make sure the name Margaret Wilson would stay with her forever. I left the hospital with my arm in a cast, but my mind had never been clearer. There was no doubt now. Emily wanted it all. She did not just want money. She wanted me gone. From that day on, Emily stopped pretending completely. She took over everything: utilities, groceries, even what I was allowed to cook in my own kitchen. David, overwhelmed with work, saw none of it. I did not blame him. Manipulators like Emily know exactly how to make men believe that everything is under control. So, I started writing a journal. Every detail, every action. I recorded Emily's words, dates, times, context. Every night I took pictures of receipts, saved them to a private hard drive, and learned how to back up everything to the cloud. I knew that if I wanted to expose someone like her, I needed evidence, not tears. I also began to act weaker, slower. I needed Emily to believe I was slipping. I needed time, and she needed to let her guard down. Because once I had enough proof, nothing would save her from the truth. When you are 75 years old and the world thinks you have nothing left to fight with, that is exactly when you can surprise everyone. I began my journey of recovery not with revenge, but with preparation. I did not tell anyone. I did not seek sympathy. I quietly made a plan, like a seamstress carefully stitching back together the torn fabric of her life. The first thing I did was visit an old friend, Julia, a retired law professor. I told her everything. I handed her bank statements, audio recordings, and photos of the bruises on my arms and back from every time Emily accidentally got rough. Julia said nothing at first. She just looked at me for a long time, then asked, "Do you want to press charges, Maggie? Or Do you want to take everything back your own way? I answered softly, but firmly. I do not want anyone in prison. I want Emily to realize that the old woman she thought she could walk over still knows how to teach a lesson. Together, we made a plan. Over the next 6 weeks, I did everything I could to build my case. I requested copies of my medical records, got written statements from my doctor, and hid a small recorder in the living room where Emily often bragged on the phone to her friends about that dumb old duck. I even enrolled in a technology class for seniors. I learned how to upload data, store things in the cloud, and send encrypted files. I was no longer the timid old lady. I was learning how to protect myself. David came home on weekends, but Emily always managed to keep him in the dark. She told him I was confused or imagining things, and David, though he still loved me, did not dare question his wife. So I changed tactics. I invited David out to lunch one Sunday, just the two of us. I said, "Sweetheart, there is something I need you to see." I handed him a USB drive. On it was everything: photos, audio clips, hospital records, statements from the doctor, and even a short video of Emily shouting, "If she does not sign, I swear I will give her another one." David froze. He sat there for a long time, speechless. And then, for the first time in years, I saw tears well up in his eyes. "Mom, how could you go through all this alone?" I just smiled, because I knew at that moment the trust between us had returned. But I did not stop there. I reached out to a local journalist, Rachel Bloom, who had written several pieces on domestic abuse and elder mistreatment. I did not want my face in the news. I just wanted her to know this story was real, and if the time ever came, it would be ready to come to light. I also hired a private attorney, Lisa Reynolds, an expert in elder law and estate planning. Lisa helped me redo every legal document, from home ownership to medical decision-making. Everything was signed in front of both a lawyer and a physician, so that no one, not even David, could make changes without my signature. I was no longer Mom Maggie, easy to fool. I was Margaret Wilson, and I was making a comeback. And then, the perfect opportunity arrived. Emily, too confident and thinking I had finally surrendered, threw a birthday party for Lucas at our house. She invited friends, family, even neighbors. She boasted about the home she managed and talked about plans to invest in more real estate soon. I stayed quiet throughout the party, but just before it ended, I stood up and gently placed a stack of documents on the table. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate my grandson's birthday. But before you leave, I would like to share a story about a mother who was pushed out of her own life and how she decided to take it back." The room went silent. David stepped beside me and placed a hand on my shoulder. Emily turned pale. She snatched the papers, but I had already emailed copies to every adult in the room. There was no shouting, no chaos, just a confrontation, quiet, calm, and powerful. I was not seeking revenge. I just wanted the truth to come out. That night, Emily packed up her things and left. No apology, no tears. Just silence. But I knew that silence was not guilt, it was shock. David stayed with me for a long time afterward. He said, "Mom, I was so blind. I'm sorry for leaving you alone all this time." I did not blame him. In my heart, being a mother is not about holding on to bitterness. It is about giving your child a chance to make things right, once they realize they were wrong. In the days that followed, I cleaned up the living room, replanted the flowers Emily had neglected. I brought out old keepsakes, our wedding photo, Robert's embroidered handkerchief, the birthday cards David made by hand as a little boy. I hung them on the wall, not out of nostalgia, but as a reminder. I had built this life with love, and I would not let it be stolen in silence. I signed up for a painting class every Tuesday afternoon. I went to church on Sunday mornings and joined a storytelling group at the local senior center. Every week, I sent a handwritten letter to an old friend, sometimes just to say, "I am doing fine, still here, and starting over." No one needed to know every detail of what I went through, but I knew I had stood up, quietly, without applause, without drama. I had stood up, and that was enough. After the party, whispers started rippling through the neighborhood. No one could believe that Emily, the polite young woman, always neatly dressed, always taking Lucas to church, could do something so cruel to her own mother-in-law. But I did not need them to believe. I only needed them to know the truth always exists, even if it is buried deep. David was the one who took the first step. He revoked every financial power of attorney he had ever given to Emily. With help from his lawyer, he immediately annulled all the property transfers Emily had coerced me into signing under emotional pressure. Lisa, my attorney, acted swiftly. With all our documentation and evidence in place, the court officially invalidated every single transfer within 2 weeks. The ruling was entered publicly into county records. Emily, who had once boasted to friends about managing the family estate, now lost all control and even had her financial custody over Lucas revoked. David was devastated. He had lost faith not only in his wife, but in himself. I would not let him drown in that guilt. I told him, "You were not wrong to trust, you just placed your trust in the wrong person. What matters most is that you stood on the side of truth when it mattered." And Emily? She did not show up in court for the ruling. She vanished from Austin a few days later. Rumor has it she returned to Washington State, where she was born. No one really knows what happened to her after that. But to me, it no longer matters. What matters is this: I got everything back. The property remains under my name. All documents are now protected by independent legal oversight. I also created a separate trust for Lucas, so that one day, if he ever needs it, he can access it transparently and directly, without going through his mother. In fact, I even donated a small portion to a local elder abuse protection fund, as a reminder that I was once there, and I want to help others know they are not alone. No one thought a 75-year-old woman, with her right arm still healing, could rise up, take back control, unmask a betrayer, and turn the entire situation around in less than 2 months. But I did it. And I did it not through anger, but through wisdom, patience, and a deep love for the truth. Victory does not always need to be loud. Sometimes, victory is simply walking away from a battle without losing yourself. Word of my story began to spread. Older women started coming to me. Some had stayed silent, like I once did. Some had lived with pain, loss, but now they said they felt inspired. I never needed to be celebrated. I only wanted each person, no matter how old, fragile, or dismissed, to know they still matter, and they can rise. One afternoon, David came to see me, holding Lucas by the hand. The little boy ran up and wrapped his arms around me. He said nothing, but the way he looked at me, full of trust, full of love, told me everything. I had won. Not because I got the house back, not because Emily was gone, but because I had saved a son and a grandson from slipping further into a world built on lies. After the court case, I received a handwritten letter from Emily's mother. She was a widowed woman living in Spokane, Washington. She wrote that she was shocked, but not entirely surprised. "I am sorry for what my daughter has done. I saw signs of selfishness when she was young, but I always believed time and marriage would help her grow. I was wrong. I did not know how to respond." A part of me wanted to write back and say, "You do not have to apologize for your daughter's mistakes," but another part felt there was no need. I chose silence, a gentle silence, not to punish, but to bring closure. I also received letters from strangers, women who had been kicked out of their homes by their own children, pressured into signing away their life savings or left alone because they were too afraid to speak. They told me that my story gave them courage to finally speak up. One letter brought tears to my eyes. It was written in shaky handwriting by an 83-year-old woman in Dallas. "Dear Miss Margaret, I never had the courage to fight back. I always believed that staying silent would hurt less, but you made me realize I still have the right to live with dignity. That was my greatest victory. Not the house, not Emily's departure, but knowing that my story had become a voice for those who once had none." Victory is not always about proving who was right or wrong. It is about deciding who you choose to become after the pain. And I, Margaret Wilson, chose to become someone who held on to her dignity, stood for the truth, and helped restore faith in the hearts of others. I still live in the same old house in Travis Heights, the one with the sun-drenched steps and the windows that once framed my pain, and now frame my rediscovery of peace. I did not change the locks. I did not move away. I did not rip out the flower bed Emily once neglected. I just tended to it, little by little, as if I were nursing a quiet part of my heart back to life. I do not hate Emily. Honestly, there is simply no more room in my heart for hatred. Maybe deep inside her is a little girl who lacked love, who always had to fight, who wrestled with fear and insecurity. But that is no longer my concern. I have placed her neatly into a drawer of memory, not with anger, not with longing. Just as a part of a story that is over, I chose forgiveness, not because she deserved it, but because I deserve peace. Every morning I wake at 6, water the plants, brew a pot of tea, and read. I now volunteer to teach a free life skills class for older women at the community center, where I sometimes share my story. Not to reopen old wounds, but to plant seeds of hope. Lucas, the little boy he once was, is now 6 years old. He visits every weekend. He loves curling up in my lap to listen to stories or helping me bake cookies. He does not ask much about his mother, but he often says, "Grandma Maggie is the safest person in the world." That sentence means more to me than any court ruling ever could. David, my son, is slowly healing too. He has taken up writing, joined community events, and sometimes we sit together and flip through old photos of Robert, my husband. Life has returned to its quiet rhythm. No more turmoil, no more fear. I do not need applause. I do not need sides. All I want is to sit on my wooden chair each evening, sip tea, and listen to the wind brushing through the leaves. I used to think that growing old meant losing everything, but now I see it is a chance to choose what truly matters. Not houses, not money, not reputation, but peace. The ability to smile at what once made you cry, the strength to look at someone who once hurt you and walk away without trembling. I, Margaret Wilson, have walked through betrayal, loneliness, and pain, but I refuse to let them define the rest of my life. I chose peace, I chose dignity, and I chose to live with purpose. Sometimes memories still come back, the looks, the falls, the sleepless nights, but they no longer hurt. They are just scars that I have learned to carry as part of being human. I understand now that forgiveness is not weakness. It is the courage to move forward, to open your heart again, to love, even after you have been broken. If someone were to ask me at age 75 what matters most, I would say freedom of the soul, knowing you hold no grudges, and still being able to love life, even when your heart has been through storms. If you have stayed with me until now, thank you. From the bottom of my heart, I know this story is not easy to hear. It is not magical. It has no fairy tale ending. It is simply the story of a 75-year-old woman, once hurt, once overlooked, who learned to stand again, one step at a time, on her own 2 feet. And I want to ask you, have you ever felt like I did? Silenced because you were too kind? Hurt by someone you once loved and trusted deeply? Lived through long, quiet days while no one truly knew what you were carrying? If so, you are not alone. Please share your story below. A real memory, a piece of your heart, or even just a line that captures what you feel. Because here, there will always be hearts like yours, ready to listen, without judgment. I did not tell my story to make you sad. I told it so you would know anyone at any age has the right to rise. We, those who have lived long lives, still matter. And no one has the right to take away our dignity, our voice, or the light in our soul. If this story has touched you, please click like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Do not keep it to yourself. Send it to someone you know who might need it. Who knows? One honest story might become a lifeline to someone in the middle of their storm. And if you do nothing else, please remember this. You deserve to be heard. You deserve to live with your full worth. And you were never, ever alone.